Thank you. Thank you, Lainey and Mike. So I suppose we should get right into it. So Mike, what is SSDI, or what is Social Security Disability Insurance?
So SSDI stands for Social Security Disability Insurance. It is a disability program that is based on your work history. It is based on the amount of money you've paid into the system, every paycheck you've ever earned. They take a little bit out under FICA and set that aside. So it really is based on the amount of money you've paid into the system, the length of time that you've worked. That's Social Security Disability Insurance.
All right, so that's SSDI, but then I also hear benefits called SSI. So what is SSI?
Correct. I mean, they're closely related, but there is a big distinction between the two. SSI is another disability program, but it's based on need as opposed to somebody's work history. Oftentimes you'll run into an SSI claim for younger individuals, for children, or for folks who, for whatever reason, have not worked enough quarters to be covered under the SSDI program. Because this program is based on need and not on work history, you do not have to have worked a certain number of quarters, but you do have to have income and resources below a certain limit.
So it sounds like both of these things are disability programs. So is the definition of disability the same for both SSI and SSDI?
It is, Tadra, and that's a common question. SSA, the definition of disability, the Social Security Administration looks at whether or not an individual suffers from a medical impairment or a combination of medical impairments that precludes them from going out and engaging in any sort of sustained full-time work. It's important to note that the medical impairment must last or be expected to last for a minimum of 12 months.
All right. So if I have a disability, or for me to be considered to have a disability under the Social Security Administration's definition, can I still live a relatively normal, for lack of a better word, day-to-day life?
Yeah, I mean, I think I get that question. And yes, Social Security is not looking to see whether an individual is homebound or bedridden or unable to care for themselves. That's not really what the standard is. You know, again, the standard is just looking at whether or not somebody is capable of engaging in, day out work based on their medical impairments.
Okay. So, it sounds like both of them based on your work and ability to work. So what about children or minors who, they can't always work or may not be legally able to work? So how does the Social Security Administration have a different definition for them, or are they ineligible for either one of these programs?
And yeah, you're exactly right, Tadra. So it makes sense that the children's definition of disability is a little bit different. For adults, it's whether or not somebody can go out and work. With a young child, in many ways, it's a little more complex. I handle many kids' cases, child's cases, and what they're really looking at are these 6 different areas, or they call them domains. And this is getting a little too technical in some regards, but essentially they are looking at the child and assessing his or her limitations or functional limitations in these 6 different areas. And I'll tell you real quick, Tadra, the 6, I wrote them down here. It's the child's ability to, 1, acquire and use information, 2, attend and complete day-to-day tasks, 3, interact and relate with others. That's more of a social, the child's social functioning. 4, moving about and manipulating objects. 5, caring for themselves. And 6, just their general health and physical well-being. So again, those are very broad and intentionally vague areas, but I think what's important to just take away from that is that kids are held to a different standard than adults. It's not about whether or not they can go work. It's about their ability to function in these certain areas.
And so when they transition from a child to an adult, do they go under the adult standard at that point, or do they always stay, like kind of you come in as a child, so you will always stay under the child's definition? Or
no, you're exactly right, Tadra. And I think it's important. We'll put a link up that has some more information about child's benefits and transitioning from a child to an adult as a disability recipient, because the standard does change as the child reaches the age of majority. In most cases, 18 or 19, Social Security will look at them under the lens of, can they go out and work now that they've reached adulthood?
Okay. All right. So I've heard, or at least the word on the street is that the Social Security Administration will look at other things, not just medical conditions, when considering whether I am disabled per their definition. Is that true? I mean, they look at other things, and if they do, what types of things do they look at?
Yep, I got you, Tadra. And the answer to that is yes, they definitely look at other things. Now, let me be clear. The overwhelming majority of Social Security's analysis is based on the medical analysis, a medical review of whether or not somebody meets their standard of disability. But they do consider a couple other things. The 2 big things: somebody's age. There are a couple important, I call them magic birth dates in a disability claim. Those are age 50, 55, and 60. Those are the 3 big ones. The older someone gets, the less restrictive some of the Social Security disability regulations become. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying they become less restrictive. If you think about it, it makes some sort of sense. Social Security is basically saying we're not going to hold a 59-year-old individual to the same standards we would a 23-year-old individual. Kind of on that same note, they will look at somebody's education as well. The more education somebody has, oftentimes the higher Social Security will hold them, the higher standard they will hold them to. So another kind of example is somebody who has a master's degree or some advanced degree may be held to a slightly different standard than somebody who dropped out in the 6th grade and maybe struggles to read and write, for example. Those are the 2 big things in addition to the underlying medical conditions that Social Security will look at.
And so with that being said, how does my past work play into whether or not I can get disability benefits? Do they look at all the jobs I had, even those jobs I had back when I was a teenager? Do they look at those temporary jobs or those part-time jobs that I may not have been, been the most into or performed the best, or,
Gotcha. Yeah, they look at your work history. Particularly, again, we're talking about adults here, and we're talking about adults who've worked in the past. They really only look at the past 15 years of somebody's work history. And then even beyond that, they really only focus on kind of full-time, sustained, gainful employment. They don't look too much at a job that lasted a few days, or a part-time job, or seasonal work, or a temporary job. That's not a huge part of their analysis. They're going to look at just the past 15 years And it's important because one of the things that Social Security is considering in analyzing a disability claim is whether or not you're able to return to any of your past gainful full-time work. So if I spent the past 15 years folding socks at a laundromat, one of the things that Social Security is going to look at is whether or not I am able to return to my past job folding socks at a laundromat. So that's why, Todd, the work history over the past 15 years or so is pretty important in a disability case.
So what are the requirements for Social Security benefits? How do I qualify?
Well, if you're talking about SSDI, remember that's that program that we first talked about. It's based on your work history and your earnings and credits and paying into the system. It can get a little complicated in some cases, but generally speaking, you have to have worked at least 20 quarters in the last 10 years prior to becoming disabled. Now, that basically equals to be 5 years out of the past 10 years you had to have worked and paid into the system. You also can't be, I get this question a lot, you can't be engaged in full-time or close to full-time work and try to get disability benefits. There are always exceptions. This isn't the place for that. I think maybe we can put some more information on the website about this, but generally speaking, it's difficult to be working a consistent day in job and still try to get Social Security disability benefits. That's the general rule, Todd.
All right. So how do I apply? How do I apply for disability benefits?
Well, and that's kind of ebbed and flowed since COVID over the past 2.5 years. I used to tell my folks, you can go down to your local office and apply. You can go online and apply. You can do it over the telephone. You can come sit in my office and we can do it together. With COVID, some things have, changed, put it that way. A lot of folks can apply online. My opinion is that sometimes it's difficult to apply online because Social Security is going to hold you to the same standard they would me or anybody else when it comes to putting in that information. I'm not trying to scare anybody, but there's nobody really there to assist you when you're doing your application online. Sometimes I have my folks call and they'll schedule a telephone interview. You don't have to go to the office. You can call your local Social Security office and they'll schedule a time to take your application over the phone. You can also nowadays, with a lot of the reopening, likely get an appointment and just go do it face to face. So there's a few different ways. Just pick whatever you're most comfortable with.
Okay. And so you mentioned SSDI, SSI. We talked a little about that. Do you have to choose between one program or the other? Like, do you have to?
You do not. So you can turn in, you don't have to know your work credits, your work history, any of this technical stuff that we're talking about. You can apply for both SSDI and SSI. You can do it. Social Security will take that application at the same time and they'll kind of figure it out. The combined benefits, however, will never total. Well, I don't want to say that, but the point is, yes, you can apply for both SSDI and SSI at the same time.
Okay. Are there different applications for each program? There are,
and it's probably easiest to put a link on there with a little more information about how to apply. But yeah, I mean, technically there are a couple different links that we're going to put onto this website that will just have that information. But you can actually do, I think I may contradict myself, you can actually do the application at the same time with the same form, with the same information. You don't have to go to two separate offices or do two separate interviews or anything like that.
Okay. So after someone applies and they get a letter in the mail, and the letter says something to the effect that they realize I have some medical problems or issues, but they think that I can still work. So are they acknowledging that I can get partial benefits in that situation? Or does that mean, I've been partially approved, or is that a denial? How does that work?
Unfortunately, it's confusing, and that's a good question. I'm glad that was asked, because when you get the letter in the mail, that's a denial. When they say, yeah, we recognize you have these medical problems, but we think you can still go out and work, that's a denial. And there'll be information in that letter that talks about your appeal rights, your right to get a lawyer. It is my opinion, again, that at that point in time, where you have the option and the choice and the decision to file an appeal and challenge the Social Security Administration's decision, that might be a good time to reach out to a lawyer and just get some information. They only give you 60 days to start the appeal process. And there are always some exceptions again, but I would not flirt with that 60 days. Don't push it to the last minute. If you're going to get a lawyer, if you want to chat about your options, make sure you reach out to somebody after getting that denial notice.
So what is the appeal process like? Is it quick and easy, or is it long and hard?
I think by this point, most everybody probably knows that it's a frustrating process. It's very long. I'll have my opinions as to why it's taking this long. I've done this for a little over 15 years now, and it's been, there's no real relief inside as to why it's taken this long or how it's going to get any better. It's exhausting. It's frustrating. The process itself, after you're denied, you can file your initial appeal. That's called reconsideration, and a separate Social Security office or individual will look at your claim and see whether that initial denial is correct. Some folks can be approved at that initial appeal. Most everybody, on a statistical standpoint, most everybody gets denied a second time. So you get a second letter in the mail that says, hey, you're denied again. At that point, you do have the right to ask for a hearing and go in front of what's called an administrative law judge. Again, that's where you hear about these nightmares with waiting and getting through the process. It is nothing for a year, sometimes longer, to pass while you're waiting on a Social Security disability hearing. So again, there may be a benefit of getting a lawyer or somebody to kind of help you out through that whole process. And about that appeal process, Tadra, maybe we can put a little link that kind of goes through and has some more information about the steps of the appeal.
All right. So my application may be pending a while before I get to go before a judge or administrative law judge. So during that year that's pending, can I work, or like, how do I get, because I'm waiting for to get that decision. So yeah, can I work during that time?
It's hard, and that's a hard question to answer. Again, Social Security is not going to worry too much about a little part-time job, a little temporary job, a little bit of money here and there. But they are going to look and see if you are working any sort of sustained gainful activity, some sort of job that's on a consistent basis. You can't be working and earning decent money and be going through the disability process. Again, that's a general rule. There may be some exceptions that apply to certain circumstances, but it is hard for folks to get through this lengthy appeal process. I have many of my clients, unfortunately, who are facing dire financial straits, facing eviction, facing foreclosure, losing cars, and it's hard to keep their head above water financially while you go through this long appeal process.
All right. And so is the appeal process the same for an adult and child, since they have different standards of or definitions of disability, if you will? Is the appeal process the same too?
It is. Yeah, yeah, it is, Todd. It's almost identical.
All right. So say I had my hearing, the judge denied my claim again. So the ALJ denied my claim. That was my third denial. You know, my initial application got denied, reconsideration got denied, the ALJ denied. So does that mean my case is over at that point?
Not necessarily. There's actually another step in the appeal process, and I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but you can, if a judge denies you, you have the right to file another appeal where your case would go to what's called the Social Security Administration Appeals Council, which is geographically located in Falls Church, Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. Somebody at the Appeals Council will review the ALJ's decision and review your case. You don't have a hearing with them. You don't physically go to Falls Church, Virginia and meet with anybody, but they will review the case. And there are times where they will actually approve the case, or they'll send it back down to the hearing office for another hearing. It just depends on kind of the facts and circumstances of the case.
So sounds like you said earlier, it's getting complicated. So, but do I really need an attorney? Is this something that I can do on my own, or how much of it can I do on my own? And when should I get an attorney if I need one at all?
So yeah, there's a couple ways to answer that. I mean, the technical answer is no, you don't need a lawyer. You can go through this process on your own. And I know for a fact that a lot of people go through this process on your own. I would encourage at some point along the way, at least chatting with a lawyer. The good thing is the way Social Security sets it up, lawyers like myself, we don't charge anything up front. We don't charge on an hourly basis. We're not allowed to. The way I take on a case is if I do not win the case, then you don't owe me anything. And so that sometimes quells some of the fears about getting a lawyer, because a lot of folks come into my office and they say, well, Mr. Shea, I can't pay you. I don't have any money. I don't have a job. So the good news is, yes, you can chat with a lawyer free of charge and kind of make that decision on however you want. I would encourage you to go to somebody who specializes in Social Security disability. It is a complicated area of law. The rules are changing constantly. The regulations are changing constantly. So my one piece of advice would be to try to find somebody who really specializes in this.
Okay. So what is a hearing like? Is it like Law and Order, where I see, there are two sides really going at it, with a judge in a black robe sitting on a high up with a gavel? Like, what, I mean, is it that way? And,
I mean, it's not supposed to be. And that's not how it goes. These are administrative hearings. There is no lawyer representing the Social Security Administration on the other side. So a lot of times, for when I'm taking a client into a hearing, what I'm explaining to them is that it's just me and you and the judge, and we're going to sit down and we're going to talk. It's going to be casual. It's going to be informal. It's going to be as relaxed as possible. But it is still very much a hearing. I mean, there's no yelling, there's no banging of gavels, there's no screaming. The judges are all, by and large, very nice, very professional, very courteous. So no, it's not what you would see if you walk down to your local courthouse and observe court one day. There's no crowd, there's no audience. Generally speaking, there's no other witnesses for the most part.
All right. So, all right. So I think you touched on this a little earlier when you were talking about work quarters and things of that nature and the SSI amount, but how much money will I get each month if I am approved for disability? So say I make that third appeal and go before the Social Security Administration, and I'm approved, like how much money will I get?
So I can't really answer that. It depends. For Title II, for SSDI cases, again, it depends on how long you've worked and how much you've paid into the system. For SSI cases, for Title 16 supplemental security income cases, it might depend on things like your living arrangement. So it's hard for us to sit here and throw out a hard number. I guess the most important thing is there are a lot of variables, and it depends on a lot as to how much your monthly benefit's going to be.
Okay. So I've been approved for Social Security disability, and is that it? Like, are they going to review my case periodically? Because it seems like they're really invested in knowing whether or not you can work. So are they going to keep asking me that over the course of my life, or the course of however long I'm receiving benefits? Or is it like one, it's done, it's over, and that's it? I don't have to communicate with the Social Security Administration anymore, except to get my check.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I understand. I think I understand what you're saying. So basically, when somebody is approved, wherever in the process they got approved, is Social Security going to check in on them from time to time? And the answer is yeah. There's no law that says how often. You'll see maybe 2 or 3 years referenced sometimes. I know for a fact I've had clients that have gone 4 or 5 years without Social Security following up. What they're basically doing when they follow up with somebody who's getting disability benefits, they're just looking to see if there's been any material improvement to their medical condition. Have they gotten better? Have things gotten better to the point where maybe they can go back to work? So I guess the answer to your question is yeah. Social Security will kind of check in from time to time and review your disability, so to speak.
All right. So we were receiving a lot of questions in the chat wanting to know, can people who receive benefits still work?
Hi, Dodra. I'll take that one. So generally, yes, you can still work as long as you are working part-time and you're earning below substantial gainful activity. But there are some additional rules about working while receiving benefits. It can be very complicated. So we will give some more information out after this. We'll send out resources. And one of those will include a lot of in-depth information on how you can work while still receiving benefits. And it's something that I encourage everyone to make sure that they fully understand before they start working, because it can cause a lot of trouble.
So you mentioned a term, so substantial gainful activity, and that seems like a very specific term to the Social Security Administration. What is substantial gainful activity?
So substantial gainful activity is a certain monthly amount of earnings. It changes every year as it's adjusted for inflation. But if you earn above that set level, you will not be considered disabled. So even if you're only working a few hours, but you're earning that amount of money, you're going to be considered non-disabled. And for this year, for 2022, substantial gainful activity is currently $1,350 per month. So $1,350 before taxes.
Okay. So do you have to report that income or any other resources you may have to the Social Security Administration?
Yes, absolutely. It's really important that when you are applying for benefits, as well as when you are receiving benefits, that you report your gross income, which is your income before taxes, to Social Security. While you're receiving benefits, you need to be reporting your income every single month, especially if it's changing. You also should report any resources, which are also called assets by Social Security. Report any resources that you own, and report any changes in those as well.
So does everything that I own count as a resource? So I have, I like handbag. So does my handbag collection count? Would it count as a resource?
That's a good question. No, Social Security is not going to take your handbags. Not everything that you own counts as a resource. They're really looking at things that can be sold and turned into cash to pay your bills. So think about money in a bank account, extra cars, boats, trailers, property or land. There are some really big exceptions though. Probably the biggest is the home that you live in. That does not count as a resource. So no matter what the value of your home is, as long as you live in it, it's going to be excluded. You also can have one car excluded as long as you use it for some kind of transportation.
So, but okay. So why does Social Security need to know my resources? Why does it need to know, about the second car or second home that I may own, or about my income? Like, why are they concerned about this?
So really for two reasons. The first is whether or not you are still disabled, and the second is your need if you're receiving SSI. So if you are earning a certain amount of money, Social Security is going to decide that you're not disabled, and then you're going to stop receiving benefits. If you are receiving SSI though, which remember, this is that need-based program that's not based on your work history, but it's based on you having below a certain amount of income and resources within a limit. They want to know what your income is to make sure that you're still within that income limit.
Okay. But will reporting the income or my resources, assets, will it affect the monthly amount that I receive, or can it affect the monthly amount that I receive?
It can, especially for SSI, the need-based program. So how much income you earn impacts how much SSI you receive per month. And so if you don't report your income, then that can result in you receiving benefits that you weren't entitled to. And if that's the case, Social Security is going to want that money back from you. For SSDI, an increase in your income could affect whether or not Social Security thinks that you're still disabled. And again, depending on your situation, you could also end up with money that you have to pay back to Social Security.
So what if I am receiving Social Security benefits and my boyfriend gets mad at me and says he's going to tell the Social Security Administration that I've been earning a little extra money on the side, mowing my neighbor's lawn? Would that trigger the Social Security Administration to look into me, or will they just let that slide?
It could. It's really important that you report your income or your assets and any changes in those to Social Security as soon as possible, because I promise you, Social Security will eventually figure it out. They will get reports from someone, they will pull your tax return, they will pull your employment history. They are really good at figuring out whether or not someone has income that they have not been reporting. And they can come back years later and say that you owe them thousands of dollars. And that's not a situation that you want to be in. And so I think it's best to avoid that up front by reporting any income that you have.
All right. So, okay. So say that did happen. And so it sounds like that will be perhaps an overpayment, or you received benefits that you weren't supposed to because Social Security didn't know about it. How will you know if you have an overpayment? How will you know if some, that has happened to you and Social Security is now looking at you and feel like you may have been doing some things that you did not report to them?
Social Security, is required to give you notice. So you're going to receive something called a notice of overpayment. It'll be a letter in the mail from Social Security that'll state how much you owe, why they think you owe that amount of money, and for what time period they're looking at. It's really important that you read that letter and understand your rights. Don't ignore it, because it's not going to go away.
All right. And what can you do if you do get an overpayment? Are there any steps you can take?
Absolutely. So first, you're going to want to read that notice of overpayment fully. Sometimes they can be very long, but make sure that you read the entire letter and that you understand it. If you don't understand it, you're going to want to talk to an attorney or someone that you trust who has knowledge on Social Security to help you understand it. You also can appeal the overpayment or request a waiver or do both.
And is appealing the overpayment and requesting a waiver, is that the same thing?
No, they're two different processes. You can choose to do only one of them, or you can choose to do both.
Okay. All right. And what is overpayment recovery?
Overpayment recovery is when Social Security withholds some of your monthly benefits because of the overpayment that you have. So if you're receiving SSI, Social Security can only take 10% of your monthly benefits, or 10% of what the maximum monthly benefit would be until your overpayment is paid. And so you might have them withholding this money for years while it's being to repay it. If you're receiving SSDI, Social Security can withhold your entire check until that overpayment is paid, but you can request a change in the recovery rate.
Thank you so much, Lainey. I think we have a few questions for some of our attendees, and I think we can jump into that now while we have a little time left. One of the questions is, if someone is already receiving Social Security SSI, what is the benefit of also applying for SSDI? Are there additional funds that can be received by that individual that has the disability?
And I can take that one, Tadra. So if the person is getting SSI, they would automatically be getting Title II disability if they have worked enough and paid enough into the system and had enough credits of coverage. At least that's the general rule. For many people, I would say for the majority of people, the benefit amount for SSDI is going to be greater than the monthly payment for SSI. So if you have a choice, and a lot of folks don't, but SSDI is going to be a larger monthly payment for most folks, not everybody, but for most folks. But keep in mind, when you're applying for one, most of the time you're applying for both. So if somebody's been found medically disabled for SSI purposes, typically that means they're, for whatever reason, weren't covered for SSDI purposes.
And also, we're getting a lot of questions about children and their, and say, for instance, them qualifying for SSI and or them qualifying for Medicaid. So is it correct that as a child to receive Medicaid, you don't have to have a disability? Is that right?
That's correct.
And so Medicaid for children is based on income, I guess. Is that right?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So for North Carolina, you have to be in certain categories to qualify for Medicaid. It's not enough to just be below a certain income. So one of those is children whose families have incomes below a certain level can qualify for Medicaid. For adults, though, they have to be in an additional category, like being pregnant or being disabled or being elderly.
Okay. But if you qualify for SSI, that automatically means you qualify for Medicaid in North Carolina?
Yes. So if you're an adult receiving SSI, you'll automatically receive Medicaid.
All right. And so I have a question regarding that. Sorry, I'm trying to understand the question so I can ask it. How difficult is it for kids to get SSI, and why don't we see more of it?
I'll take that one, Tadra. That's a hard question to answer. I don't know why it is so difficult. It is a more complicated process. It's a little more abstract when you're talking about the standard of disability. I think it also goes to access to medical treatment, access to diagnoses. I mean, a lot of what you're going to see with kids, particularly younger kids, is not somebody, is not similar to somebody who's 55 years old and has been working for 35 years and they've got some degenerative conditions in their back and spine. I mean, with a kid, a lot of times you're talking about things that are just different. ADHD is a very big one that I get a lot of calls about. Anxiety disorders, bipolar disorders. So I don't know why more kids don't get disability benefits. I'll just say that the standard is a little more complex for kids often than when you compare it to adults.
And I'll add to that, since SSI is a need-based program, Social Security looks at the income and resources of the parents as well. And I think that can make it hard for some kids who, even if they have a very severe disability, if their parents are working and their parents are earning a decent income, unfortunately, they're probably not going to qualify.
Which I know someone had a question about the Innovations Waiver, which is a Medicaid waiver program in North Carolina. Just to add to more confusion, with SSI, your parents' income does count. They do count it. But however, with if you get a Medicaid waiver, if you're a child, they don't count your parents' income. So it can get confusing, complicated, if someone qualifies for one program but doesn't, or why do they qualify for this and not that? You have those two things at play there. So hopefully I didn't just confuse people. Lainey gave the best answer. Don't pay me any attention. So, and I'll ask Lainey, do you know, is there a hard number of how much money an individual can have in savings to receive SSI?
So for SSI, the total resource limit is $2,000 for countable resources. So remember, that's not counting your home, that's not counting the value of one car, that's not counting furniture, medical equipment, that kind of thing. But if you have, say, $500 in a savings account, and then you have a second car that's worth maybe $2,000, that total, they're going to add both of those together. So you'll be at $2,500. And that's going to be too high. So $2,000 total countable resources is your limit.
Okay. All right. Going through questions because we're getting great audience engagement and participation. And these are some great questions. Some of them are a little too good. So I'm trying to see. Someone is asking about, and this always confuses me too, is the trial work period under Social Security. I do think there's a such thing as a trial work period. And do either of you know anything about it? I only know that I think there is one, or at least there was one.
There is, and that may be something where, I mean, we could probably spend 3 hours talking about the trial work period and work-related expenses and all these other kind of very, very, difficult concepts. But maybe we can post something, Tadra, that will kind of answer that. But generally speaking, that if a disabled individual, if they take the proper steps, can oftentimes go out and try to work. Again, you're communicating with Social Security, you're talking about your intent, you're talking about what it is you want to do. And if you do things correctly, a lot of times you can work and earn sometimes as much money as you want to earn and still get your disability benefits. Now that may fall a little bit outside of the trial work period into some other categories. But I think what Social Security is trying to do with a lot of these programs is set it up where if you want to try to work if medically you think you've reached a point where things have gotten a little better, whether it's physically, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, whatever, they want to encourage you to try to go back to work, but they do expect you to kind of follow some of the steps and guidelines that they've got in place.
Okay. All right. Right. Two. So it seems like since SSI has the component of being a need-based program, that the resources that you have most likely will affect if you're receiving SSI, some portion of SSI. Is that true for SSDI? Does SSDI also consider the resources that you have? I know it considers your income because it's substantial gainful activity, or at least that's what we learned today. But does it also look into resources and things like that?
No, SSDI does not look at your resources.
So you can have any number of resources under SSDI or any amount.
Right. The only thing that really matters is for SSDI, is if you have income while you're receiving benefits.
And Tadra, I look at it, I use the example sometimes of Elon Musk or Bill Gates or, these billionaires out there. If something happens to them, they could get disability. They can't get SSI.
Okay. However, their children probably would get SSI. Is that correct? Because their children, thinking that their children have not worked. Is that right?
So for children who are still minors, remember they're going to look at the parents' income and the parents' resources. So for example, if we're talking about Elon Musk, if he still has a minor child, they're probably not going to qualify for SSI. But then once that child becomes 18 and is an adult, they might qualify then, because Social Security will then only look at the individual's income and the resources once they become an adult.
So in that situation, would that child now get SSI as an adult?
If they meet the disability and the income and resources, they could.
Okay. All right. Yes. Because it seems like if anyone, child or an adult, if they qualify under their work history, if you have no work history, then you will get SSI or very little work history. Is that right?
Yes.
Just making sure we hit that. So we're getting many questions about that. So I want to make sure people take that with them. I think any other questions that come in or we are happy to answer them later in a later email or on our FAQ that we send out later and post to our website later. So I want to ask Mike and Lainey, I don't have any more. Are there any more questions, or do y'all have anything that you would like to say?
I'll just say thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We appreciate getting to share with everyone.
Yep, and I'll echo that. Thank you, Tadra and Disability Rights NC. You guys do great work. Serving the entire state of North Carolina. Y'all should be commended. As a former legal aid attorney, I'll also plug legal aid and Lainey and her group because they do wonderful work.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So also, I would like to thank you, Lainey, and you, Mike, for sharing your expertise with us. If there were any questions that we were not able to get to today, please let us know and we will try to get them answered for you. As y'all can see, sometimes it can get complicated. It can get complicated very quickly. But you can find a recording of this presentation on our website in ASL, English, and Spanish. And then again, we will send additional resources to you in a later email. So thank you all. Thank you so much for all of y'all being with us. And hope y'all have a great rest of the afternoon. Stay safe.